Welcome back to the deep dive. So, we've got a stack of notes today that I have to be honest looked a little bit like homework at first glance.
Yeah, I mean, we're digging into AP European history,
Right. Specifically the years 1350 to 1550.
which is sort of the danger zone for history topics.
How so?
Well, it's the stuff everyone thinks they already know, so they just, tune out.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened to me. I saw the title Italian Renaissance, and my brain immediately autopiloted to, like, the Ninja Turtles.
Right.
I'm thinking Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, Raphael. I'm picturing some nice marble statues, maybe a dome in Florence.
The classic stuff.
Exactly. And I'm just thinking, okay, pretty art, guys in tights, moving on.
And that is the standard sort of museum tour version of the Renaissance. And it's not wrong. I mean, the art is incredible, but it's almost a distraction.
A distraction.
Yeah, because if you only look at the paintings, you miss the actual story.
And that's the hook for me today. Because looking through this research, the art is really just the glossy cover of the book. The actual story inside is about a fundamental psychological shift.
Yes.
It's like a software upgrade for the human mind.
That is the perfect metaphor. This was the moment Europe basically woke up and decided that the afterlife wasn't the only thing that mattered.
Right.
It's the invention of the modern ego, really.
So our mission today is to unpack that. We want to figure out how a bunch of people in Florence and Venice basically invented the modern world, our politics, our education, even the way we think about ourselves. But we have to set the scene first because the notes paint a pretty bleak picture of the prequel. I mean, this was not a happy time to be alive.
No, it was a horror movie.
Yeah.
You have to remember, coming into the 1300s, Europe is effectively living in a graveyard.
Wow.
The Western Roman Empire had collapsed centuries ago, right? Leaving this massive power vacuum and just ruins everywhere. And then, much more recently, you have the Black Death.
Yeah, the stats here are insane. I mean, I knew the plague was bad, but the notes say it wiped out something like a third to half of the population.
Almost half the population.
And that's just between 1347 and 1351.
In just a few years. So imagine the psychological state of the survivors.
I can't even...
You were traumatized, your family is dead, the economy is completely shattered, and you're surrounded by the crumbling ruins of Rome.
Which is a civilization that was, objectively speaking, better at building things than you currently are.
Exactly.
It feels like a post-apocalyptic setting. You're looking at the Colosseum and thinking, giants used to live here, and now we're just scavenging.
That's exactly it. And usually, when things get that bad, societies collapse even further, or they turn hyper-religious in a really fearful way.
Right, they panic.
But in northern Italy, they did something counterintuitive. They didn't look forward for a solution, and they didn't just pray harder, they looked backward.
Which leads us to the core concept in the research, which I want to spend some time on because it's often misunderstood. Yes, humanism.
Right. Today, if you say humanism, people think of, like, secular charity or maybe atheism.
Being a nice person.
Yeah, just being nice. But in 1350, it meant something very specific. Think of humanism as the engine of the Renaissance.
Okay, so what was the old engine then?
The medieval operating system, to use your metaphor, was entirely theological.
Meaning everything was about God.
Entirely. You were defined by your relationship to the church. Humans were seen as small, sinful, and largely irrelevant compared to the divine.
You're just a tiny speck.
Right. Your life on earth was just a waiting room for the afterlife. It was a test you had to endure.
So just keep your head down, pray, suffer through the plague, and hope you make the cut for heaven.
Pretty much. Humanism completely flipped that script. It was this radical idea that human beings are actually awesome. Yeah. That we have dignity, we have potential, and that understanding the world here and now is a worthy pursuit.
But the notes make a specific distinction here, and I think this is where people get tripped up. This wasn't an anti-religious movement, was it? They weren't, burning Bibles.
No, not at all. And that's a huge misconception. These guys were almost all devout Christians.
Okay.
You have figures like Marsilio Ficino or Pico della Mirandola, who were trying to harmonize the Bible with Plato.
Melding Greek philosophy with Christianity.
Exactly. Their argument was, God created us. God gave us these incredible brains. So if we celebrate human intelligence and potential, we aren't insulting God. We're complimenting the architect.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. It's a shift from I'm a worm to I'm a miracle.
Precisely. And the guy who really kicked this off is Francesco Petrarca, mostly known as Petrarch.
The father of humanism. The notes describe him as a bit of a wanderer.
He was a fascinating character. He's living in the 1300s, and he's just obsessed with ancient Rome. He starts dumpster diving through old monasteries and dusty libraries, looking for these quote-unquote forgotten books.
Looking for the ancient knowledge.
And he finds letters by the Roman orator Cicero.
And reading Cicero changes his wiring.
It completely breaks his brain in the best way possible. He realizes that the ancients, the Greeks and Romans, had a grasp on human emotion, on virtue, on the sheer complexity of life that his own society had completely lost.
They were more advanced emotionally.
Yeah, and he gets so into it, he starts writing letters to these dead authors as if they were his friends.
That's a little eccentric. Dear Cicero, sorry I missed you by 1,000 years.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
But it sparked a movement. He made it cool to be an individual again. He made it cool to focus on human experience.
So he essentially said, we don't have to just be miserable sinners, we can be virtuous citizens.
Exactly.
Okay, there's a technical term in the notes that I really want to drill into because it sounds incredibly boring, but the story behind it is wild.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Philology.
Yes. Philology. It's defined here as the study of language history, which sounds like the driest class imaginable.
It really does.
But the notes say this was a weapon. How on earth is grammar a weapon?
Because in the Renaissance, philology was the birth of critical thinking. It was the specific tool they use to challenge absolute authority.
Okay, the best example in the notes is the story of Lorenzo Valla.
Oh, this is great.
Walk us through this because this reads like an actual detective story.
It is a detective story. So for centuries, the Catholic Church held this document called the Donation of Constantine.
What was it?
It was a legal decree, supposedly written by the Roman Emperor Constantine back in the 4th century. And it basically gifted the Pope vast territories and absolute political power over the West.
So this piece of paper is the deed to the landlord's property.
Yes.
It's the reason the Pope gets to act like a king, not just a spiritual leader.
Exactly. Well, Lorenzo Valla is a humanist. He's a massive language nerd. He sits down and reads this document in the original Latin.
Okay.
And because he has studied how Latin changed over the centuries, he notices something.
What does he find?
He finds words that shouldn't be there. The document used vocabulary and grammatical structures that simply didn't exist in the 4th century.
Like anachronisms.
Right.
Yeah.
It contained words for fief and satrap in contexts that made absolutely no sense for Roman times.
Wait, so it's like finding a letter supposedly written by George Washington that
Yeah.
says, just Google it.
That is the perfect analogy. If Washington writes Google it, you know it's a fake. Valla proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt using just linguistics, that the document was a medieval forgery.
That takes serious guts. I mean, you're using grammar to call out the most powerful institution on earth.
It shattered the blind trust in authority. Valla showed that you could use logic, facts, and evidence to dismantle a 1,000-year-old lie.
Wow.
That is the exact moment the modern critical mind is born. It's the shift to, don't just believe it because the Pope said so, show me the receipts.
Show me the receipts. I love that. So if you change how people process information, from blind faith to checking the receipts, you inevitably change how they learn. Which brings us to the education overhaul. The notes mention something called liberal studies.
Right. Before this, education was purely vocational. You went to university to become a theologian, a lawyer, or a doctor. That was it.
Job training.
Exactly. But the humanists said, no, we need to study history, moral philosophy, rhetoric, poetry, grammar.
These are the humanities. This is literally the liberal arts degree.
It is. And the word liberal here comes from libertas, freedom. This was the education worthy of a free man.
Interesting.
The goal wasn't just to make a worker. The goal was to make a virtuous, well-rounded citizen who could actively participate in the world.
That concept of participating seems key here. There's a term in the research, civic humanism. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it was a reaction against the monks.
How so?
The monks said, to be good, withdraw from the world, go pray in silence. Civic humanism, which was championed by guys like Leonardo Bruni, said no. If you are smart and educated, you have a moral duty to your city.
You owe society.
Right. You shouldn't hide in a library. You should be running the government.
So use your big brain to fix the potholes and balance the budget.
Exactly. It's the active life versus the contemplative life.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the ultimate how-to guide for this new type of person.
Ah, yes. The Book of the Courtier by Baldassare Castiglione.
Yes.
I was reading the checklist for what makes an ideal courtier or gentleman in this book, and Honestly, I got exhausted just looking at it.
It is an impossibly high bar.
Seriously, you have to be a warrior, physically fit, educated in the classics, musical, artistic, funny, but not a clown, and you have to make it all look effortless.
That's the key concept, sprezzatura.
Sprezzatura.
Yeah, the art of making the difficult look easy. You never show the sweat.
It sounds exactly like the original hustle culture, or like an Instagram influencer who posts a perfect photo with the caption, "I woke up like this,"
Right.
even though it took 3 hours of prep and professional lighting.
It really is the exact same energy. Castiglione is basically telling you to curate your personal brand. You aren't just born, you construct yourself into a work of art.
Which is fascinating. And that obsession with image leads us directly to the visual side of the Renaissance.
The art.
Right, let's pivot to the visuals, because we said earlier that the art is just the icing. But looking at these notes, they suggest the art was actually the marketing department for all these new ideas.
Absolutely. Think about the difference. If you look at medieval art, it's mostly flat.
Very two-dimensional.
The figures are stiff, almost alien. And that wasn't because they were bad artists. It was because the focus was entirely on the spiritual. The body was just a vessel for sin, so why make it look good? Why study it?
Enter the Renaissance, and suddenly everyone in the paintings is ripped.
Exactly. That's naturalism. Artists like Donatello and Michelangelo start dissecting bodies.
Illegally, usually, right.
Yes, often illegally. Just to understand musculature and bone structure. They start sculpting full nudity again.
Yeah.
It was a massive philosophical statement.
What were they trying to say?
That the human body is a miracle of engineering. It's perfect. It's not something to be ashamed of.
And then you have the tech side of the art, perspective. I always thought this was just a cool drawing trick, but the notes say it's actually deeply philosophical.
Oh, it is the biggest game changer. Brunelleschi and others figure out the math to create a 3D illusion on a 2D surface.
Using a vanishing point.
Right. But think about what that actually does. Geometric perspective works from a single vanishing point, which means it organizes the entire image around the eye of the viewer.
Oh, wow. So instead of the painting being organized around God or a king, it's organized around me looking at it?
Exactly. It puts the human being, the viewer, at the literal center of the world. It frames reality from the human perspective.
That is wild. So even the math of the painting reinforces humanism.
It does. And you see the absolute culmination of this in Raphael's painting, The School of Athens.
I love this painting. It's basically a fantasy dinner party of all the great Greek philosophers.
It is. You have Plato and Aristotle walking through this massive, beautiful Roman archway. But here is the ultimate Renaissance flex.
Okay.
Raphael paints these ancient Greeks with the faces of his friends.
Really?
Yeah. Plato has the face of Leonardo da Vinci. Heraclitus has the face of Michelangelo.
So he's saying we are the new Greeks.
He is placing his contemporaries on the exact same level as the greatest minds of antiquity. It is a massive ego boost for the era. It's basically them saying, we have arrived.
But this raises a cynical question for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
Paint is expensive. Marble is heavy. Building a giant dome in Florence takes decades. Who is paying for all this? Because starving artists don't build the Duomo.
Now we have to follow the money. This is the system of patronage. You cannot have the Renaissance without the Medici family in Florence or the popes in Rome.
And they weren't doing it just because they loved pretty pictures, right?
Oh, definitely not. It was PR.
Pure and simple.
Think about the Medici. They are bankers. They are technically engaging in usury lending money at interest, which was a literal sin at the time. They are also basically running Florence like a mob family without actually holding an official title of king.
So they have a major legitimacy problem.
A huge one.
Yeah.
So what do? You hire Michelangelo to build a spectacular tomb or a library to distract everyone.
And suddenly you aren't a greedy banker anymore. You're a benevolent patron of the arts.
Exactly. The art was a projection of power. It said, I have the money to make this happen, and I have the exquisite taste to know it's good.
So behind all the beauty and humanism, there is a lot of ruthless, calculated politics.
Absolutely.
Which is the perfect segue to the guy who literally wrote the book on ruthless politics, Niccolo Machiavelli.
The man, the myth, the adjective.
It really feels like whiplash in the notes. We just talked about Castiglione saying, be nice, play music, be a virtuous gentleman. And then Machiavelli comes in and says, actually stab that guy if you have to.
It is a very stark contrast. Machiavelli writes The Prince in 1513. And you have to understand his context. He isn't writing this from some ivory tower.
Right. He was in the trenches.
He has seen Florence invaded by the French and the Spanish. He's been personally tortured by the Medici. He's seen the government completely collapse.
So he's traumatized too.
He is looking at the utter chaos of Italy and saying the idealism of the humanists is completely useless here.
So he thinks the good guy approach gets you killed.
He thinks it gets your country conquered. His argument is that a ruler cannot afford to be a good Christian in the traditional sense.
Why not?
Because human beings, in his very cynical view, are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. If a ruler tries to be loved and plays fair, people will take advantage of him.
It is better to be feared than loved. That's the famous quote, right?
Yes. If you cannot be both, it is safer to be feared. But the nuance is important here, and the source material stresses this. He doesn't say, be a monster for fun.
Right.
He says, be cruel if it is absolutely necessary to keep the state stable.
So the end justifies the means.
Yes, the survival of the state is the ultimate moral good. If you have to lie, cheat, or kill to prevent anarchy, that is actually the virtuous choice for a ruler.
That is incredibly modern. That sounds exactly like modern political science.
It is realpolitik. He officially separated politics from ethics. He looked at the world as it actually is, not as it should be.
Which makes sense, given what he lived through.
And in a weird way, he is the ultimate humanist because he is dealing with human nature in its rawest form, without any theological sugarcoating.
Okay, so we have the ideas, the education shift, the art as propaganda, and the brutal new politics. But there is one factor left in the notes that explains why we are talking about this 500 years later.
The catalyst.
Right, because there had been rebirths before, right? There was a Carolingian Renaissance in the 800s. Why did this one stick?
Technology. Specifically, the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg around 1440.
We always hear the printing press changed everything, but help us really visualize the impact. Why was this the ultimate accelerator?
Think of it as the difference between handwriting a letter to one person and posting a tweet to millions. Before Gutenberg, books were handwritten by monks on animal skin.
Which takes forever.
They were rare, incredibly expensive, like cost of a whole farm, expensive, and full of copying errors.
And controlled entirely by the church, presumably?
Completely controlled. If the church didn't want a book copied, it just didn't get copied. Gutenberg breaks the gatekeepers.
Because suddenly you can mass-produce text on paper, which is cheap.
Yes. Ideas can now travel faster than the authorities can ban them. When Martin Luther posts his 95 Theses a bit later, they are printed and circulating across all of Germany in 2 weeks.
That's essentially going viral in the 1500s.
Exactly. Without the press, the Renaissance stays a local Italian fad. With the press, it becomes a European revolution.
It democratized knowledge.
It exploded literacy rates. It standardized language. It is the single most important technological shift until the internet. It made it impossible to put the genie back in the bottle.
Wow. So when we step back and look at this whole period, from 1350 to 1550, what is the big takeaway here?
How do you mean?
Well, we went from Petrarch writing letters to ghosts, to Valla debunking the Pope with grammar, to Michelangelo carving the perfect human, to Machiavelli writing the brutal rules of power. What connects all these very different things?
The common thread, honestly, is the invention of the individual.
Break that down for me.
In the medieval world, you were a cog in a machine. You were a member of a guild, a parish, a village. You didn't really have a personal biography. The Renaissance changed the operating system. It said, no, you are a distinct entity with your own agency.
You matter.
You have a voice.
Yeah.
You have the power to actually shape the world through art, through politics, through knowledge.
It moved the center of gravity from the heavens down to earth.
It didn't deny the heavens, but it validated the earth. It validated the human experience. And we are still living in the house they built. Our entire education system, our fundamental belief in individual rights, our value on innovation, it all traces back to that software upgrade in Italy.
And there is a final irony here that the notes point out, which I love. This whole future-facing revolution happened because they looked backward.
That's the great paradox of the Renaissance. They didn't invent humanism from scratch. They found it buried in the ruins of Rome. They used the past to unlock the future.
And that is the question we want to leave you with today. The Renaissance happened because they realized they had forgotten something crucial about what it means to be human.
Right.
So look around at our world today. We have all this technology, all this incredible progress. But what ancient wisdom or forgotten way of living have we discarded that might actually hold the key to our next great leap?
Is the blueprint for our future hiding somewhere in our past?
Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
See you next time.